Today we are taking a look at the Maven 3. The shell uses signature 3D printed titanium construction. It's surprisingly lightweight. Despite being a metal shell, it's just approximately 9 grams. Honestly, I'd say it's as good as many resin shell IEM in terms of comfort. The shell is nicely rounded, so you will never feel any sharp edges or hard spots that make it feel uncomfortable to wield. The faceplate features a hexagonal star motif inspired by celestial mythology, symbolizing a crescent moon embracing the stars. It's pretty interesting design. The rest of the shell is made out of smooth flowing curves and the mirror polished finish, giving it a very strong reflective appearance. The stock cable is very soft. As for the accessories, you get a hard shell carrying case. The lid is finished with a leader-like panel embossed with unique melody logo, while the interior is lined with a soft suede-like fabric, giving it a premium feel. For ear tips, includes 3 pairs of Sentinel Celeste tips, along with 3 pairs of unique melodies on blue-born silicone tips. You also get a cable clip, a cleaning cloth, and warranty card. As for the driver configuration, the Maven 3 uses 2 dynamic drivers for the bass, 2 balance armatures for the upper mids, and 2 balance armatures for the treble, 4 electrostatic drivers for the ultra highs, and 2 bone conduction. It's rated at 105 dB at 1000 Hz with a nominal impedance of 8.8 ohm. On paper, the sensitivity doesn't look particularly high, but I suspect that's largely because the impedance is so low. In actual use, it's basically a haze detector, very sensitive to source noise. Looking at the impedance curve, the impedance measures 6.8 ohm at 1000 Hz. The lowest impedance is 5.3 ohm at around 10.8 thousand Hz, while the highest is 10 ohm at roughly 4.7 thousand Hz. Overall, the impedance variation is relatively modest, which means source output impedance has very little effect on its frequency response. Now let's look at frequency response. Very unique melody. The most recognizable feature is undoubtedly the treble. I think that flat 3000 region followed by a towering 4 to 8000 Hz peak has become something of a unique melody signature. If you have watched my previous review of the Mast's Fortune, this probably looks very familiar. Starting with the bass, the response gradually slopes downwards from the sub-bass, almost like a gentle ramp. In theory, that means you get excellent sub-bass extension. Pick drums should have satisfying depths, and the sub-bass is very well represented. At the same time, because the lower mids have already tapered off quite a bit, the bass shouldn't come across as particularly thick or bloated. Then we get the really interesting part, the 2000 to 4000 Hz region. Not only is there no traditional 3000 Hz peak, it's actually recessed. I think nowadays a flat 3000 Hz region isn't that unusual anymore. The YO9 and the T Pro are good examples. Their 3000 are basically flat yet sound quite good. Maybe this will be a trend for next generation of IM tuning, I don't know. But something like the Maven 3, where this area is entirely full below that, is still fairly uncommon. This region mainly affects things like vocal presence, articulation, and the perceived position of vocal and mid-range instruments. So in theory, this dip should push forward farther away, while guitars and vocal lose a little of their forwardness and bite. But then, right afterwards, the 5 to 8000 Hz region shoots up dramatically. So instead of sounding dark or dull, the Maven 3 enters with a rather unusual presentation. The images are pushed slightly farther back, yet the outlines remain bright, crisp, and highly defined. This kind of boost generally increases the perceived sense of detail and resolution, because it makes the edges of instruments sound much sharper and more clearly defined. The result is a presentation where detail immediately jump out at you. It's extremely impressive on first listen. The downside, of course, it also emphasizes sibilance. Snare drums take on the harder attack, female vocals become noticeably brighter, and over long listening session, it can become fatiguing. Fortunately, the response dropped back down again between 8 and 10,000 Hz. If the entire 5 to 10,000 Hz region had stayed elevated, the treble would probably be overwhelmingly aggressive. Thankfully, the pulled it back before it reaches that point. So Overall, this is a distinctively U-shaped tuning. There's a tremendous amount of information in the sub-bass, while the lower mids gradually taper away. Then comes an unusual dip around 3000 Hz, which reduces vocal presence and pushes the main image slightly further back. Immediately afterwards, the strong 5 to 8000 Hz emphasize boosts perceived resolution, note definition, and overall excitement. Finally, another rise around 11 to 13,000 Hz restores some era and harmonic sparkle. On paper, this should result in a sound that is crispy, bright, and highly resolving, that makes a very strong first impression. That said, compared with a more neutral and natural tuning, I'd expect it to trade away a bit of long-term listenability and some of its sense of natural. Moving on to the subjective listening impression, one thing I've noticed about unique melody over the years is that their frequency response graph almost never seem to predict what they actually sound like, especially that treble. Looking at the graph alone, the massive peak is literally the same as a Iron Mountain, resulting in a brutal shock and fatiguing top end. But just like the Masked Fortune I reviewed previously, the treble and sibilance simply aren't that aggressive. In fact, the treble isn't particularly bright. I describe it as sitting just on the brighter side of neutral, enough to sound lively but not excessively so. Extension is also very good. Overtones rise naturally into the upper treble, giving the presentation a nice sense of openness, almost as if the sound keeps going upward. The Maven 3 also has a surprisingly powerful low end. I think it's all thanks to the excellent treble extension. The overall presentation never feels closed in or congested despite having plenty of bass. If not that treble extension, this would definitely be something terribly bassy. The treble itself is handled very smoothly, and yeah, really. Despite that huge gain, there's very little harshness, and note edges remain clean and well defined. This character becomes especially obvious with vocal. The Maven 3 places a strong emphasis on vocal micro details. Things like inhalation, breathing between phrases, and soft breath sense are much more noticeable, to the point where they almost feel slightly magnified. It also creates an interesting sense of ear surrounding the vocals. It's also as if the singer has stepped a little closer to the microphone. Breathing, lip movement, and even subtle changes in airflow inside the mouth are reproduced with remarkable clarity. The soundstage has a rather interesting shape. Instead of being exceptional wide, it's more like a vertical stretched rectangle. The width is respectable, but it's the depth that really stands out. Some extend naturally forward and backward, giving the presentation a convincing sense of front-to-back layering. As a result, the stage feels more like, I would say, like a box stretching into the distance, making it easier to distinguish the different layers of instruments and the relationship between the individual section of the mix. The bass, on the other hand, is probably the biggest surprise. In fact, it's the least UM-like bass I've heard. The best way I can describe it is very nightclub. First of all, there's a lot of it, and I mean a lot. The bass has tremendous quantity, and the notes are physically large. It's the very first thing you notice when you press play. In fact, it's probably the most dominant element in the entire presentation. There's almost always this huge bass image sitting in the background, constantly driving the music forward. When the kick drum lands, it isn't just a quick thump, it's a thick, dense wave of energy that expands outwards. Sub-bass extension is excellent, and it digs surprisingly deep, revealing plenty of information in the lowest octaves. That said, the Maven 3 isn't trying to impress you with an ultra-elastic. Instead, its focus is more on the impact and quantity. The initial hit is incredibly solid, with a powerful sense of slam that gives every drum strike real physical weight. This kind of bass works especially well with pop music, with every electronic kick drum lands with raw authority and giving the music a strong sense of rhythm and momentum. Cellos benefit quite a bit as well. The resonance of the instrument body becomes noticeably fuller, making the entire instrument sound larger and more physical. That said, again, I'll tell you my honest thoughts. While I'm a bass head and I like this kind of bass quite a lot, I do honestly think the bass image is indeed very large. Personally, I enjoyed it, but if you are not much of a bass head, there's a good chance you will find it a little too dominant, perhaps even a bit of excessive at times. The mid-range is tuned very comfortably. Note density is right where I want it to be. It never comes across as thin, but it also avoids sounding bloated from excessive warmth or thickness. Overall, it strikes a very nice balance. Vocals are positioned slightly behind the instrument. They sit a step further back in the mix. As for the timbre, it's fairly neutral. There's no strong link to either a warm or cold tonality, and very little added coloration. Instead, the Maven 3 opts for a straightforward presentation. As a result, whether you are listening to male vocal, female vocal, or different kinds of instrument, nothing feels overly artificially flavored. It represents everything in a fairly honest and even-handed way. So overall, the Maven 3 is an IEM that almost seems to defy its own frequency response. On paper, the treble looks like it should be piercingly bright, but in reality, it's surprisingly smooth, with excellent extension and a very natural sense of openness. It also places a strong emphasis on vocal micro detail. Breathing, mouth movement, and subtle changes in ear flow are all brought forward very clearly. Vocal themselves sit slightly further back in the stage, while the timbre remain neutral, without any obvious warm or cool coloration. Then there's the bass. It's abundant, physically large, and delivers tremendous impact. It's a very nightclub style low end, big and bold. In fact, I'd say the bass is easily the Maven 3's defining characteristic, the thing that grabs your attention more than anything.